Good afternoon. Everybody got so quiet. Thank you. Welcome to your September 10th work session. I will call us to order and turn it over to City Manager David Cook.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. All right, we have a couple organizational updates. First, I'm going to call on our library director, Midori Clark, and she's going to recognize one of our programs. Here she comes.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for your grace as we crowd this work session with our incredible library staff who's here today. I want you to know that every person who's here was selected by their team to represent them today to be here. After being here for 9 months, I can tell you firsthand how dedicated this team is to serving the community. And we really saw their incredible skills and also their love for Fort Worth shine through with this year's summer reading program at the Fort Worth Public Library. So I'd like to share some statistics with you. We had 8,608 participants this year, which is an incredible 43% increase over last year. We also had 4.5 million minutes read this year, which was another incredible 106% increase over last year. Thank you so much to the mayor for her lending us her cachet, her name for our fantastic reading challenge. Just in case you didn't want to do the math in your head, that is an average of 9 hours of reading per person this year. And that's compared to an average of 3.5 hours per person last year. In case you're interested, we had the most growth in our adult and also in our pre-reader age groups. And technically, our pre-readers are read to by adults. So we had a big gain there. And I also want you to know that every single library had an increase this year in the minutes read across the board. So great news there. But we do want to recognize a special team. Our special recognition this year goes to La Grande Biblioteca, and if this is our incredible staff. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. They are the winning library of our internal summer reading challenge, which is awarded to the library that has the largest percent increase in participation over the past year, and you can see they had the most participant growth at 433%. I am so grateful to this library team that serves the community so well, and I just want to thank you all very much for recognizing their incredible work today. Thank you so much.
To the library team that came today and also to your colleagues that are running your libraries, thank you very much for doing such an outstanding job. I had a quick reminder of what it's like to read to toddlers when I came to Ridgely Library. I think it's been a little bit, but I'm always humbled by the work that you do and the communities that you serve. So thank you on behalf of the city and the council and for making this year's summer reading challenge such a success. And we're going to beat that next year as well. So congratulations.
Great work. Next up, I'm going to call on Kelly Picard, and she's going to recognize one of our Parks and Recreation employees.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Kelly Picard, Assistant Director, Park and Recreation. Thank you for the opportunity today to recognize the extraordinary actions of Judy Rodriguez. Judy is a proud resident of the Diamond Hill community, but she is also a 17-year employee at Diamond Hill Community Center, which is one of the ways she gives back. One of her favorite jobs that she does at the center is work with our active aging population in the Best Years Club. And on July 17th, at one of the Best Years Club functions at a gathering, one of the participants started choking. Judy implemented classic first aid protocol. And I'll pause and say this is part of our community center training for our staff so that we are always prepared for this. And I want to thank Sherry Inslee, who's in the audience. She is an instructor. Her job is district superintendent, but teaches employees all across the city classic first aid. And so that day, Judy recognized this. She saw signs of distress, went up, implemented protocol saying, "Are you okay?" Got a shake of the head, no. "May I help you?" Got a shake of the head, yes. And after 3 times doing the Heimlich maneuver, the food was dislodged. The participant was fine, needed no further medical assistance. And so I just want to recognize Judy for what she does every day, but for this extraordinary action serving the community.
I'll let Judy think about it, but I'll just give a few words. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Judy. It's really our city employees that are part, of our communities that make a difference in our city. So Judy stepped up where the need was there. She was prepared. It's a good thing to have that training. So I won't belabor the point and read, this recognition, but needless to say, you're committed to excellence, and thank you for performing a life-saving measure to save one of our valued senior citizens. So thank you, Judy. Okay. You want to go up there? Let's step around there. So on behalf of the Parks Department and my office, we present you with a little token of our appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, for coming today. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I'm going to call on Jessica McEachern to recognize a couple employees in Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am going to first start with Kelly Picard. Again, so I'm going to have Kelly come on up here. So most of you have already worked with Kelly, and you know her through her role as the Assistant Director of the Park and Recreation Department. Kelly manages and directs the Recreation Division right now, which is responsible for all of our community centers, Log Cabin Village, Fort Worth Nature Center, Late Night at 6 program, and the aquatics facilities as well. Kelly is retiring this month after 26 years of service. And so it's very bittersweet for me to recognize her and thank her, but also wish her well. She has done some incredible things throughout the city, and I just want to share a few of those things with y'all. So she began her career on June 1st, 1998 as the Historic Site Supervisor at Log Cabin Village, and she served at Log Cabin Village for almost 20 years before promoting to the Assistant Director position over Recreation. While at the Log Cabin Village, Kelly accomplished many noteworthy things. She professionalized the museum operations. She served as a peer reviewer for the American Alliance of Museums and served on the advisory committee for Museum Assessment Program. She served as a grant reviewer for the Institute of Museum and Library Services, managed numerous restoration projects on the 19th century structures. She helped form 501c3 support groups to raise money for Log Cabin Village and the Van Zandt Cottage. And she also spoke at many national, state, regional, and local levels on professional museum operations. Kelly served in many capacities for the board of Texas Association of Museums for 11 years and served as president for 2 of those years. 6 years ago, Kelly promoted to the assistant director position over the Recreation Division. She brought consistency to community center operations by analyzing the operations and developing a tiered system for staffing and hours. She focused on cultivating and sustaining a positive workplace culture and providing excellent customer service. During COVID, Kelly led all of the division's facilities, which resulted in a Texas Recreation and Park Society award for community centers' Camp Connection response to the need for virtual learning. She assisted in numerous emergency response activities for hurricane evacuees and inclement weather sheltering. And she participated in the development of multiple impactful capital projects, including the Diamond Hill Community Center, the Northwest Community Center, the Marty Leonard Lotus Marsh Boardwalk expansion at the Nature Center, and the Forest Park Pool. Kelly has been an integral member of this team, and we are truly sad to see her go, but we are so excited. One of the things that Kelly and I bonded quickly over is our love of travel and RV camping. And so she and her wife Sandy they already go on a lot of trips right now, but they're about to embark on many, many, many more adventures, both enjoying their retirement in their new fabulous RV, I might add, named the Frida Rome, named after artist Frida Kahlo. And it is fabulous. I'm very jealous. I've told her that already. But please join me in recognizing and thanking Kelly for her many years of service.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Jess. I'm gonna try not to get all emotional here. I have so loved representing the city of Fort Worth. I've loved living in the city of Fort Worth, serving this community. But I think one of the things I'm taking away is I work with the most incredible team, both in my division, but everyone throughout the park department and our executive team. All of my direct reports are just amazing and such talented, hardworking individuals. And throughout all the departments, I've worked with so many great people. So it's just been an honor. Have amazing, fond memories that I'll be taking on the road. but also Fort Worth will still be hometown, and always treasure every time I come back to it. So thank you all for 26 great years.
Awesome.
Wait, Kelly, before you go, Kelly is one of the few city employees that I had the opportunity to know before I took this position, and she was still at the Log Cabin Village. You have always been such a pleasure to work with professionally and personally. So thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for your tremendous help with Forest Park Pool. I mean, what I think I heard you say up there when you were speaking is that we're all welcome to come visit you in Taos. Is that correct? I hope you have so much fun up there.
That's great. Jared, please.
Kelly, I can't let you get off the hook without me saying anything. Thank you for your service to the city. I have personally been blessed by just the many impacts that you've made on our kiddos, especially in District 6, whether it's with the late night programs and getting those started, or ensuring that every kid in the city gets to go to a community center without having to pay for a membership. I mean, you've tremendously impacted so many children's lives through all of the programs that you have led with your team. And so just so grateful. We'll miss you, and there's certainly big shoes to fill when you're gone. But just thank you for your service, and cheers to all the road trips you'll take after this.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Congratulations, Kelly. Thank you very much.
All right, and speaking of big shoes to fill, we are excited to announce her replacement, who's here. So Monique, come on up. And Monique got the memo this morning about how to match me on our outfit today. So I love it. So we are excited to introduce Monique Hill to you as the new Assistant Director of the Park and Recreation Department Recreation Division to replace Kelly. So Monique is no stranger to the city as well. Many of you also likely know her. She has been with the city for 22 years. She has worked originally in the Parks Department as a community center coordinator, thank you. And then she went to the Neighborhood Services Department as a superintendent, still working with community centers. And so we did a nationwide search for this position. We had more than 120 applicants, but Monique rose to the top, and we realized we had our talent right here already, and we were so excited for her. She is moving over, and one thing I'll mention, you might remember through our budget discussions, we are taking all of the community centers that are managed by the Neighborhood Services Department. Effective October 1, they're actually going to move over into the Parks portfolio. To the customer, they will see no difference. It has no changes to the customer, but this transition is also just perfect timing with Monique taking over to help facilitate that, and Kelly worked very hard to lay the groundwork on that as well. In the assistant director role, Monique will oversee all of the community centers, the aquatic facilities, the Fort Worth at 6 late night program, all of the camps and after-school programs, Log Cabin Village, and the Nature Center. I know that Monique is going to be very successful in this role because she is very adept at developing sustainable programs and collaborating with our community partners, which is just such an integral part of our community center operations. Monique is a Fort Worth native. She's a proud graduate of Trimble Tech High School. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in social work from Grambling State University. She earned a Master of Social Work from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, and she earned a Master of Public Administration from the University of Texas at Arlington. So please join me in welcoming Monique as the new Assistant Director.
Thank you so much. I will tell you, I am very excited for the opportunity. I have worked with Kelly and Richard and Dave and Casey now for a long time before this, and with a lot of you all, and so I'm very excited for the opportunity. I feel like there are huge, Kelly's not a big person, but she's got a big footprint. But she's paved the way for us, and I'm very excited for the opportunity and looking forward to all the things that we'll get a chance to work together to do. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you for all that. Now we jump to informal reports. Our first informal report is on Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport amendments to codes of rules and regulations. And
Yes.
Paul Tomey is here if there are any questions.
Yes.
Questions? Paul, come on up.
Hey, Paul. Hello. Thank you, as always, for just all the amazing work that DFW Airport does. I personally fly out there countless times, and so just really grateful for all that y'all do for our community. I have a couple of questions on this IR, just 3 of them. And so if you don't mind, indulge me for a second. I noticed on the changes to these amendments, several things, and just wanted to get your clarification on it. The first question is, why are y'all proposing these changes? Like what triggered these changes? And are these updates addressing new operational concerns, legal requirements, or other factors?
Both. This particular set of code changes is heavily on First Amendment issues. The Supreme Court says that under the First Amendment, we have to make reasonable accommodation for those who want to picket or solicit or do any sort of First Amendment expression. And we get so many of these applications that we thought it would be wise to put into the code a lot of the rules that we impose and are allowed to impose under the rules. It would take way too long for me to go through them all, but that's the basic purpose of those changes. We also have some changes to our smoking prohibition. We tried to define where you can and cannot smoke, and we have a lot of problems with people smoking on the ramp who shouldn't be. We tried to define it as a general rule, but we found that it was just impossible to enforce. So what we're proposing now is that the CEO should be allowed to designate with signage where you are and are not allowed to smoke, and it will be a code offense to violate that. And finally, we're also revising our rules on commercial photography licenses to make very clear that the only rules we impose on that is that you can't interfere with public safety. And there's a list of things you cannot do. We thought it'd be wise for the public to know that. And then finally, we're adding a few streets to our code, which we have to do in order to enforce the speed limit.
Awesome, thank you for that clarification. 2 more questions and I'll be done. The second question is, what process was used to engage local stakeholders with these changes, including airport employees, labor unions, community organizations, about the proposed change, and were there any concerns that were raised in the feedback process?
I don't think we had any comments from any labor unions or other stakeholders about this. Again, we're not really changing what we do, we're just making it better known. We're confident that all of our rules, especially those dealing with the First Amendment, are consistent with federal case law.
Okay, great. Last question. How do these proposed changes to DFW's codes compare to similar policies at other major airports. Did y'all notice any differences or common trends? And then I know there was also a legal or a lawsuit with the Cincinnati airport related to a similar policy. And did y'all consider that as well, knowing that there was an injunction there on that policy?
I don't think we've had any injunctions on the policy.
In Cincinnati, I'm sorry.
Oh,
It was in
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati Airport, yeah.
Well, I don't know specifically what case you're talking about, but I can tell you that we confer with Airports Council International and every other commercial airport in the country on a regular basis. This is a very popular topic of conversation every time we go to legal committee meetings, and I can assure you our policies are very consistent with those of other airports. In fact, we kind of lead the way in terms of defining what is a sensible First Amendment accommodation policy.
Right, thank you. And I appreciate all the clarification. And again, thank you for the amazing work that DFW does. It's my responsibility to just make sure that as we're voting on things that we consider all, ramifications if there are any implications for lawsuits or anything like that, especially since it's dealing with the First Amendment. So
Absolutely.
thank you for
And
clarifying that.
if at any time you get curious, just don't hesitate to give me a call.
Yes, sir.
I love to discuss that subject.
Thank you, Paul.
I just had one
ahead,
question. I'm not sure if Jared asked that question. Is this new change going to prohibit the unions from picketing at the location?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
What it will do is specifically define where they're allowed
they
to be
can.
and the signage they can hold. We don't allow people to set up tables, which is annoying to some of them because they want to do that. But if we allowed everybody who applied for a First Amendment permit to set up tables, we'd have a crowding problem within the terminals. And we do put limits on how they're allowed to interact with people. They're not allowed to solicit donations. They're not allowed to argue with people who just want to get to their plane. But we are required by law, and we do allow people to picket and to leaflet inside the terminals as required by the decision from, I think it was 92, the Hare Krishna case you may be familiar with, may have heard of it. It was sort of the seminal case that defined First Amendment obligations for airports. Fascinating read if you ever want to.
Midnight reading, right? Yeah, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Any other questions for council? Okay.
All right, our next informal report is a monthly report on the release of area from our extraterritorial jurisdiction, and DJ Harrell is available if there are any questions.
Any questions? Yes, Macy, Councilmember Hill.
I
That's
just
not
had a
DJ.
definition question. What defines a petition as being ineligible?
In order for a petition to be eligible, I'll kind of answer it differently, is it cannot be in an exclusionary area, meaning that it has to be outside the 5-mile buffer of the Naval Air Station, or it can't be in an area defined as an industrial area that the city has defined, or an area that is under a strategic partnership agreement. So in this case, for these two that were ineligible, they were actually within that 5-mile buffer, and that's what made them ineligible for it.
Thank you.
Okay, and just to clarify, I think there was 4 others. 2 were withdrawn, and it was due to misunderstanding what the intent of this ETJ release was. They actually wanted a septic letter. One was withdrawn because they had some issues with the description, but unfortunately, they came back and applied once again, and they were eligible. And I think there were 2 that were, let's see, ineligible. What were the other 2? Withdrawn, ineligible, and I can't think of the other 2. But anyways, we've had about 88 that have been successfully released. So.
Any other questions for council? No. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you.
All right, our next informal report is Panther Island Equitable Development Initiative, and Fernando Costa is available if there are any questions.
No questions, but Fernando, if you can give us just a concise overview of where we're at with those efforts. No outreach has been being done by public meetings, around, my council district. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Councilmember Flores, Mayor and Council. You'll recall that earlier this year, acting as the board of the Fort Worth Housing Finance Corporation, you approved the allocation of funding in the amount of $37,500 toward a $230,000 budget for this Panther Island Equitable Development Initiative, which consisted of 3 parts. The first part is what Councilman Flores has just described. That's the preliminary community engagement phase in which a team of professionals under direction from the Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber of Commerce reached out to multiple stakeholders throughout the north side of Fort Worth to brief them about the Panther Island project and how it might affect the north side, and to solicit their comments about how they would like the north side to grow and develop in the face of Panther Island. That was the first phase, and we've recently received a report from the community engagement team on their findings. The next phase, which is probably the most prominent, occurs next week with the arrival in Fort Worth of a team of 8 nationally recognized real estate development experts associated with the Urban Land Institute, or ULI, to conduct a week-long workshop on the impacts of Panther Island upon surrounding neighborhoods, particularly on the historic north side, and how we can use Panther Island as a catalyst to revitalize the north side and conserve attributes of the neighborhood that we think are worth preserving. The north side is well known as a gateway into Fort Worth for many immigrant families going back to the early days of Fort Worth. It remains a gateway today. It's a focal point for Latino culture in Fort Worth, and this effort is aimed at preserving that culture, even as we accommodate the kind of growth associated with Panther Island. In fact, I think the next IR on your agenda contemplates an update of the Panther Island development regulations to accommodate that growth. The third phase in this project is the implementation of recommendations from the ULI panel, and in fact, we've already raised funds to launch implementation activities. So this is an exciting time for the north side of Fort Worth. Much credit goes to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for providing leadership in this effort. They are the sponsor of the ULI panel. Credit as well goes to the various local foundations and businesses that are co-sponsoring this effort with the Fort Worth Public Housing Finance Corporation. So thank you, Councilmember Flores.
Thank you, Fernando.
All right, as mentioned, the next informal report is an update of the Panther Island Development Standards and Guidelines. And Justin Newhart is available if there are any questions.
I'd like to call Justin up. I have one specific question, and he can go ahead and elaborate on his efforts as well. Justin, you and I, talk regularly about this, and it's my understanding that as part of future efforts, there's a regulating plan that's part of what you're doing that concerns future street planning. And I know that's been one of the relevant topics in my discussions with the 1012 North Main folks, given where they're at, located in the Panther Island area, and how that, will develop over the course of time to make sure that they have appropriate access. So if you can tell us a little bit about that, and then just kind of give an overview of what you're working on the updates.
Sure. So the current Panther Island form-based code has the regulating plan and map within it that regulates the construction of future streets and pathways throughout the island. So as part of the code update, we're going to look at that component along with everything else to make sure it aligns with the recommendations from Lake Flato, including, do we have enough access? Do we have enough streets in the right places? Do we have enough pedestrian pathways throughout the island to make sure that all of the sites that are available for development do have access to the grid?
Okay. And when do you expect that that regulating plan to be touched on, time-wise?
We'll touch on it along with all the other components of the code, over the next couple months, this fall and winter, as we're engaging stakeholders in the community on what they want to see in terms of updates to the development regulations. So, next 5 to 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Justin. The next informal report is an update of the Camp Bowie Revitalization Code. And that's Justin again. Any questions?
Justin, can you just give a quick overview of it?
Yes, this code is very out of date. It hasn't really been updated since it was adopted by you all in 2012. So we're doing a comprehensive update. We're coordinating it with our other form-based codes and mixed-use districts throughout the city, so it's easier to develop consistently throughout Fort Worth, and we're making it easier to read and understand. So it's not just easier for staff to implement and review projects, but it's easier for the community to develop in the Camp Bowie district.
Thank you, that's all.
Yep.
All right. The next informal report is a professional services agreement amendment with Visit Fort Worth, and Robert Stearns is available if there are any questions. All right. Oh,
Yep, go ahead.
yes. Robert?
Thank you, Robert. I had just a quick question of the 16 million. How much of that is allocated to the Fort Worth Sports Commission out of Visit Fort Worth funds?
How much that to the sports commission? How much?
I know they get funding from Visit Fort Worth. I didn't know if some of the 16 million is allocated directly to them or if how that works in the budget.
I don't believe so. I would have to get with Mike Crum and those folks to get a firm answer on that
Will
one.
you check on that for me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Robert. The next informal report is on grease trap requirements for commercial kitchens. And Chris Harder is available if there are any questions. Chris?
Chris Nettles has a question for Chris Harder.
Chris?
Chris, I think when I first brought this up, it was a concern of the requirement for grease traps for restaurants in the city of Fort Worth was the same as for like commercial kitchens in churches, daycares, etc., which does not even get close to the type of performance that restaurants are performing. Is that information in your IR today?
Yeah, it is. And the IR is actually one of the longest IRs we've ever produced in water utility.
Yeah. That's why I didn't really get all the way through it. That's why I'm asking you, is it in your IR?
I joked yesterday that it was like my go-to-sleep document. I'm not gonna lie, Chris. It was hard to get through.
So if you have a commercial kitchen, you will have to have a grease trap. And sometimes, I think in the case of your situation, Councilmember Nettles, there was maybe a kitchen shown on the plans, but it wasn't necessarily planned to be constructed. But if there is a commercial kitchen, it will trigger a grease trap. So the difference that you may have is you have the kitchens that are like the heat and serve type of a situation, and then you have the full kitchens. So what you will normally see is that type of a kitchen that has a heat and serve type situation, they will go with what's called the hydro mechanical type grease trap. And that is sized differently than you would have for a full commercial kitchen with dishwashers and those type of things, where you'll have the much larger grease traps. And if you look at the, there's actually a table that provides a breakdown by size of the inventory of grease traps in Fort Worth. There's over 3,200 of them. We have actually about 20% of them that are less than 500 gallons. So those small type heat and serve kitchens that don't necessarily have dishwashers, don't necessarily have a lot of cooking going on, those will get by potentially with a hydro mechanical grease trap that is much less expensive and much smaller.
And is this standard? Because I was working with someone that was serving food, and they were required to have the large grease trap. So they were doing like some kind of feeding after school or something to that effect. And so that's kind of why I asked this question. But you're telling me that their size should be a lot smaller than what's required for a restaurant?
Yeah, I'm saying that, so there's two different types of grease traps out there. There's the type of grease traps that that separate by gravity. Those are the larger type grease traps. And those are the ones that require much more capacity. The smaller type systems are those hydromechanical ones. And those are not only significantly less expensive, but also less volume.
Okay.
And I will just say that from our perspective, the ordinance and the sizing guidelines that we've had in place for over 20 years now have been very successful. And when you look at the large utilities that are under consent decrees right now, the Houstons, the San Antonios, they are coming up to our standards and even going beyond our standards now. So our standard is ultimately a performance-based standard. What we do is we will measure the effluent coming out of the trap, and the grease concentration has to be below 250 milligram per liter. So it's not just the installation itself. That installation has to be maintained, and it has to be performed. And if you look at the number of violations that we've had just over the last 5 years, you'll see that that performance is actually happening. The number of violations have dropped considerably over the last 5 years.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, I have lots of questions today. Chris, does it matter the type of structure? If it's a temporary structure or a drive-through, does it matter if they're, as long as they're cooking food and they have to have a grease trap? Does that dictate the size? Do they have to have one if it's a temporary structure?
Yeah, even if it's a temporary structure and they're going through the permitting process for it, then it would trigger a grease trap.
Okay.
I may want to get with you after the meeting just to kind of get an example of what you're talking about.
Okay, let's do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was Chris's 8-page informal report. To show he could write a 1-page informal report, the next one is Chris's too. It's the irrigation ordinance compliance informal report.
Sure, update, please. Yeah, Chris, can you just give an update on that? It's worth hearing.
Yeah, actually, that did cross my mind that I had bookends here, 1 page and an 8-pager. So what this informal report is just kind of report back to you as council, kind of what we've seen in terms of violations of the irrigation ordinance. Now let's kind of step back a little bit. If you remember correctly, we financed the AMI remote read meter program with a low-interest loan from the Water Development Board. Part of the reason why they were willing to finance that is because this is a conservation tool. And conservation is a water supply strategy according to the Texas Water Development Board. So since we've converted all of our meters to remote read meters, we now have 186,000 customers that are signed onto that portal, which is every utility would love to have that kind of a utilization. So that's the customer side. The goal is when customers get an hourly usage that they have access to, we're wanting them to be good stewards of their water use. Now on our end, so all of our meters got installed in 2022. We had a very, very hot and dry summer of 2023, which put considerable stress on our system. We are looking at using the remote read meters as a tool to ensure that customers are following the ordinance that has been placed since 2014. So I asked staff to go ahead and start running queries on a weekly basis to see what kind of compliance we are seeing. So with the 300,000 accounts that we have, we were seeing about 15 to 20,000 customers that were not following the ordinance requirements. Whether they're irrigating on a Monday, they were irrigating during the 10 to 6 restrictions, or they were irrigating more than 3 times a week. So not only that, we've been running this query every week since the beginning of July. But not only that, we have customers that have actually received a violation notice, which is just a card or a text, every week for the last 9 weeks. So, unless we actually have some type of enforcement behind this ordinance, I don't know that you're ever going to get those customers to change their behavior. So, again, the goal with this IR was to kind of brief you on what we're seeing and then talk about these fees that we've had on the books for a while related to ordinance violations.
Thank you, Chris. The next informal report is on our stormwater utility rate amendment process and timeline, and Jennifer Dyke is available if there are any questions. All right. Next is Tarrant County 911, structure, funding, and the fiscal year 25 budget approval, and Valerie Washington is available if there are any questions. All right. Then the final informal report is an update on Texas A&M Fort Worth campus project, and Roger Venables is available if there's any questions.
Roger, if you could just give a very brief overview on what's in this informal report, because I want to make sure anyone that's watching knows the amazing things we've got going on at our new A&M campus.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Beck. So over the last several months, we've been working with the Texas A&M University and our developer to program the space, if you will, for the new building. It's essentially initial design concept, massing of the building, but more importantly, to understand the programming requirements of the university. There are a number of state agencies and schools within the university system that are vying for space in the building and excited to come to Fort Worth. And so a good bit of effort has been spent on that part. Well, in August of this year, the Board of Regents felt so great about the project that they gave the thumbs up to move forward with what is the next real milestone, which would be design and pre-construction services. So this would essentially get us to 100% architectural schematics, construction plans, permit approvals, and a gross maximum price for the project so we can move forward with construction. There'll be a couple of action items on council's agenda for the 17th. One of which is authorizing the LGC to issue debt to move forward to fund the pre-construction work. And the second one would be transferring funds of an uncommitted amount from the original $5 million and the amount of $2,353,000 to the LGC to, again, to help pay for a small portion of design services. So we're excited about it. Following up on the 24th, we're going to come to the LGC and request some action items there so we can move forward and issue debt before the end of the year, get the project moving. So, you're welcome.
Mayor, that concludes my report.
Thank you, David. Council, moving to any questions regarding changes in memberships, boards, or commissions, or questions regarding zoning cases, or questions regarding the M&C log that's in your packet. If not, we'll move to our first presentation on the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. Our friend Chris Quinsat is here from DFW as our Chief Financial Officer. Chris, it's good to see you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be here in Fort Worth. I know you've got a busy agenda, so I'll give you a very quick overview of our budget. We have, once again, record passengers, revenues, and net revenues this year. Our expenditure budget is up about 6% at $1.3 billion, and what the airlines pay us in landing fees and terminal rents is up $46 million, but $8.6 million less than what we told them when we negotiated the use agreement last year, so they're pleased with this budget. When you look at passenger forecasts, you can see we're going all the way back to 2019, and we are really doing quite well with 6.5% growth over each of the last 4 years, including what we're budgeting for next year. When we look at DFW cost center revenues, almost $593 million of revenues from non-airline sources, up 9.4%. And then these are the major revenue sources, and parking, concessions, and rental car are up primarily because of passengers. Commercial development, we have more acres under development. and interest income is driving the $7 million positive variance. So we've up a total of $50.8 million. And here is the net revenues, or the profit that we make on our non-airline revenues. And the dark blue shows what we keep for ourselves to spend on the airport as in our discretionary capital account, and the other in the lighter blue is what we give back to the airlines to lower what they pay us. So a healthy sum at $144 million this year. As we look at our expenditure budget, focus you down on the table. You can see operating expenses are up 5.8% and debt service is up 6.2%. Each of the next 5 years that bring you the budget, debt service is going to go up. We've got a $9 billion capital program right now, so we'll be borrowing money to finance that. And when you look at our operating budget, if you focus on the orange bars, you see the total increase in our operating expense budget each year, and we're at one of our lowest increases in a while. But on the blue bars, if you look at that, that's inflation adjusted numbers, and actually the lowest we've had since FY23. This is a walk forward of our budget we show you every year. We had $14 million in budget reductions, primarily from things that were one-time costs this year that we're not repeating. Employee-related increases include a 4% merit increase for general employees and 4.5% for our DPS, along with some pension funding and health care increases. Fixed contract increases relate totally to contracts already awarded by the board that next year just go up because of inflation primarily. We have digital and technology investments of 5.8, and the big one there is Workday implementation. And then we have customer-related increases that relate to adding busing and more attendance in our parking lots to help find parking spots while we do as much construction as we're doing. And then other increases is up 9.8, and that's primarily to reestablish the CEO contingency that we put in the budget each year at $8 million. So total of a $39 million net increase. And then when we look at what the airlines pay us, if you'll look at the 24 budget to the 25 budget, that's actually what they're paying us today for landing fees. And so you can see it's actually a drop next year, but the terminal rents are up about $5 a square foot. And so this is the budget we're asking you to approve, $1.318 billion. It includes $10 million outside the rate base, which we've asked for the last 15 years. So if revenues come in higher than we expect, the board, this is totally controlled by our board. We can make some additional investments. Sometimes like this year, we're actually putting a little extra money into our pension plan. And then finally, each year we show you our tax sharing from the to the owner cities. Euless, Irving, Capel, and Grapevine have tax sharing arrangements with the airport. They paid in a total of $27.5 million for calendar year 23, which was up 18%, and Fort Worth share was $11.7 million in 23. And that's a very quick overview of the budget, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have one. As far as meeting the net zero emissions target for 2050, has there been any discussion on that from the airport? Because that's looming, and the projections show that number of passengers that are going to be traveling is expected to triple by 2040. I think I had read. So what's the status on that front?
Good question. We actually have a net zero goal in 2030 rather than 2050. And we're at about an 81% total reduction now. We have two major initiatives that will be implemented over the next several years. The first is an electric central utility plant, which will become operational next year. That will take us very close to the definition of net zero. And then we're also converting all of our fleet over the next 5 to 10 years, and that will ensure that we're actually achieving that goal. So we're the largest carbon neutral airport in the world today. We are at, may not mean anything to you, but there is an industry association that sets standards, and we're at the highest level that you can have from an industry perspective. Now, that does not include the airlines, what they contribute. That's what DFW produces.
Understood. And just a follow-up question.
Sure.
As part of that pollution mitigation plan, are you employing the use of green walls around the airport? You know, that kind of like biofilters for pollution?
We have biofilters in our terminals for the HVAC systems, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure if
what I'm
I'm answering
talking
your
about
question.
is actually greenery, right? Vegetation.
Oh,
You know, and in like vertical barriers that can just, you know, filter out those pollution.
In all of our
elements.
commercial development projects, we have requirements for environmental standards and planting more trees and things. Not necessarily the wall you're describing, but we'll jot that down and try to get back to you with some specifics if we have anything.
Okay, and then just one other one other different question. Vertiports. Has DFW Airport looked at the use of vertiports? I mean, eventually to become more of a multimodal hub?
We have, we are looking at by our corporate aviation facility, putting in five spots. The project is funded, and we are working on it. We'll be working on it over the next couple of years. But right now, that's still tied up with the FAA and how, you know, actually that's going to work from an airport standpoint.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Chris, great to see you. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Council, next on our agenda is the update on police meet and confer. William Johnson, our assistant city manager, will lead the discussion.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. William Johnson, Assistant City Manager. I'll preface this presentation with a caveat that everything that we're going to discuss is subject to final vote and ratification by the membership. And you'll see in this presentation that that process is going to start on tomorrow. Key dates and timeline. As of, I'll just draw your attention to September 5th. All articles have been tentatively agreed to by the POA and the city. We're having this discussion on today. POA is going to start their ratification process on Wednesday, and they anticipate being completed with that process before this comes back to council to vote on the 17th. I'll remind you that our contract expires, the current contract expires on September 30th, and October 1st would be the effective date of a new contract, assuming that it's all ratified. Some key initiatives that we discussed and were able to make progress on. We added a second position on full release to the association for association-related business. We shortened the time to conduct hearings of disciplinary appeals. We've made tremendous progress in bringing police officer pay closer to the market median. We were able to increase the initial starting age of a police officer. This really applies a lot to officers that are transferring in from other agencies. Physical incentive pay will be paid now when the officer passes a physical exam, as opposed to having to wait until September every year. Promotional criteria is reduced from 4 years to 3 years for corporal. It's reduced from 3 years to 2 years for sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. Holiday pay is observed for Juneteenth, which is a process that we've already been doing. We just incorporated it into the agreement. We were able to eliminate some of the minimum qualifications that were restricting our ability to hire positions as for certain civilianized positions. This will be a 4-year contract. It would expire on September 3rd of 2028. If it's not approved at that point, it would go into an evergreen period. And for lateral hires, we can apply they're allowed to apply for promotional opportunities following 2 years from their commission date. I showed you this slide before where around 2021, 2022, contrary to the historic rate at which the city was well above the market median, we fell below the market median. That blue line represents where we are in Fort Worth. We think we're about 12, 13% below that market median. Before this agreement, a lot of cities don't have contracts, so as the market moves year over year, they're able to just be flexible and make adjustments in salaries, but we're pretty locked in once we sign our contracts. Getting to the wages, the wage structure is a combination of steps and ranks. So for steps 1 through 4, those are the early years of a police officer's career. That's where we were most behind the market. In year 1, they would get a 12% increase. Steps 5 through 8, year 1, a 10% increase. We're eliminating the step 9 as it exists in the current contract. So in the new contract, today's step 10 becomes step 9. That shortens the time that it takes for them to reach max salary. Today's step 11 will become step 10 in the new contract. And both of those for steps 9 and 10 will receive a 5% increase in year 1. In subsequent years, in 2026, 26 through 28, steps 1 through 8 will receive a 3% across-the-board increase for all ranks and all throughout the pay structure. That increase would begin in January of 2026, then January 2027, January 2028. For steps 9 through 10, in year 2, they receive a 4% increase beginning in January of 2026, 5% in January 2027, and 5% in January 28th in all ranks, effective the first pay period of January. You might recall this chart. It kind of shows the blue line at the bottom, kind of shows where we are today. That green line represents how much we were able to close the gap with this agreement. I'll point out that, in the past, the agreements have typically just been an across-the-board adjustment. Sometimes they might front-load a little bit here or there, but it hasn't been this complicated. We didn't have to break it up into the different steps in order to make progress on our market like we did. So hats off to all of the team that was involved in negotiating on both sides. The POA and their team working with the city and our team, our HR group, the law department, everyone who really put in the time and effort to be creative to come up with a solution that leaves us walking away with something for everyone who is affected by that agreement. In terms of cost of contract, our year 1 cost is going to be $18.56 million. And you can see years 2, 3, and 4 with the increases that I described. Total cost of contract over that 4-year period is $47.1 million. And that breaks down to about $39.8 million hitting the general fund, additional 7.3 hitting CCPD. It's about 15.5% of salaries that are currently loaded into CCPD, covered by CCPD.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. William, not to interrupt you too much, slide 7, I just want to be sure I was reading that right. In getting rid of the old step 9, becoming the current step 10 to be new step 9, how much time is saved for them to reach that, max salary point? Is that 2 years?
Each step is about 2 years,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Okay, thank you.
And this slide just gives you kind of a comparison to the general employees over the last few years, where police had a contract that had a cost increase locked into just at 3%. In '22, we were issuing an average of 6% base pay increases to general employees. It was a very competitive time period where we made adjustments. We had 4% pay for performance up to 7%, plus an additional 2% just because we recognize the difficulty it was to attract and retain employees. In fiscal year '23, we had the 4% again for pay for performance up to 7%. We also had an additional 2.5% that was applied for hard-to-fill positions, and that affected over 1,500 employees. And then in fiscal year '24, again, 4% pay for performance up to 7%. It's just really to showcase the differences between these two different organizations and what we've done historically for general employees.
Next steps, as I mentioned before, the POA between Wednesday and probably Monday, Tuesday of next week, we'll be meeting with membership, hopefully having a success with getting the contract ratified. Mayor and council would then approve the agreement as part of the council meeting on September 17th. Ordinances are being prepared as needed to be included with that, and the new pay rates would be effective October 4th, 2024. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for William?
I just had one question, and it's the same question I asked earlier. I didn't get an explanation for it, but I think on the first slide, you said they need to add an additional full-time officer to, what is the reason of that?
Our workforce has grown substantially, and as we deal with hearings and meetings, et cetera, they currently have one person that's dealing with all of that. We were able to accomplish that without any real significant cost impacts to us. They have a number of hours that they have available, and so we were allowing them to utilize those hours. Basically, it amounts to us taking a person, letting them be paid by the hours that are donated by the membership, and us asking council to increase the authorization by 1, so that the same dollars that we're spending to pay for that person a day will just pay for that new person that we're bringing in.
And does the contract articulate that is how it's going to be operated for the duration of the contract?
Yes, yes.
So each
yes,
year, they're going to be paid through the hours that are donated to
Yes.
And I lost my train of thought. Okay. Thank you.
Jared?
Just dovetailing off of that, what type of work is included in that scope?
It's similar work that's done by the POA president now, representing employees when there are issues, discipline, any policy changes that we might be considering. They participate in discussions around those conversations with our command staff, et cetera, on behalf of police officers.
Thank you. Second question, in this role, is there language within our policies about any type of outside activities outside of that scope, and they're not being allowed to do that? Example, political campaign.
Yeah, not on our based on our costs, under our specific contract costs, that's not allowed.
Okay, thank you. Last question. I requested a different breakdown of the compression costs so that I could better understand it. I'd like to see that before we vote on the budget. Can y'all provide that?
Yes. We have the rate table, maybe, that they can explain, that'll help explain as we increase salaries or compensation, especially on the front end of the table. It creates compression between the frontline officers and the next level up of supervision. And so we can explain, we can provide you copies of that.
Okay, great. I know I requested for a different formatting on it in our last budget work session to reflect previous tables that y'all provided on compression. So the last table was really hard for me to kind of decipher, and I love tables, so the previous formatting y'all used would probably be way more helpful for me.
Okay, we'll get that for you.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Beck?
Just to follow up on Jared's question about the scope of that position that the city is paying for and what they can and can't do, is there any monitoring to make sure that that's being followed?
The hours that they are allowed to use, they do have to request the use of that time. And it is tracked in our system, so we keep up with how many hours are used. They get 6,000 hours that are donated from the membership every year, a pool. And then as those hours are used down, once we get to the end of that contract year, any remaining hours roll over. That's the extent of, I guess, all the monitoring that goes on related to that. Is that good? Okay. Any other
I do
questions?
remember my other question, and you did ask it. I mean, you answered it. I just want you to put it back on the record again, is that this additional officer that's gonna be used for this job will be coming from a reserve position, not from our officer pool.
There may be an officer, we may have an officer pool now that has been doing some work. They may select one of those people to be full-time. But once they go full-time, they're being paid for out of that pool of 6,000 hours that they get every year.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about that. I think the question was making sure we're not taking the officer off the street.
Right.
to-
And that's the reason why we would ask for council to increase our authorization by one. For that one person that comes out, we'll have one more person authorized so that we're not losing any officers on the street. So, correct, it's not going to affect our ability to have officers on the street. Any other questions?
You're good? Okay. Any other questions from council? Will you go back to the schedule real quickly, William, towards the beginning?
This one?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
You're good. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions, council? Okay, we'll move to our last presentation, which is active capital projects and funding gaps, solely led by Christiane Simmons, Fort Worth Lab Chief Transformation Officer.
Hello, everyone. I feel like
Hello.
everyone looks sharp today. I don't know what it is. It's the fall, the oncoming fall. All right, so I'm going to close us out today by giving a progress report on capital funding gaps. So you might remember we were here in May talking about this last, and we have a couple of pending items on your September 17th agenda. So just thought we'd give a progress report to that end. So here's a quick snapshot. So this table here represents all the active capital projects in the city. So this is governmental and enterprise activities. This is bond, not bond, all the projects. So this is sort of the universe of what's going on. So a little over 2,400 active projects. You see the budget there. And so this slide's really meant to show, first of all, there's a lot going on all across the districts, and a lot of citywide projects, which don't necessarily mean citywide, but maybe they span more than one district at a time, so they get categorized in citywide. And of those active projects, you can see that there's really a very small percentage that have a funding gap, so that's good news. The bad news is that it still has a dollar figure, right? $115 million is what we're looking at in funding gaps at this time. This table reduces the previous list to just bond projects, because I know that's where, those are the voter-approved projects where we really like to focus. And so this table is reducing that previous project list to just those that are associated with bonds from 2014, 2018, 2022. And you'll see that of the capital project funding gaps, most of them, a little more than 80%, are part of bond programs. So that's concerning. That's something we want to continue to look at. And as a side note plug for the lab, that's really a place where the lab is plugging in when it comes to preparing for the 2026 bond to ensure that we're really estimating those projects in a way that's really tight and takes into account the trends we've seen in inflation, the way that costs tend to change between bond program votes and then execution of the projects. But you can see here 246 active bond projects, the budget there, and there are 17 of those projects that have a funding gap that's just a little under $100 million. So this is what we showed you in May. So these are the general capital project gaps sort of by governmental function, so transportation, parks, and the rest. And so in May, we were sitting at about 168.5 million in general capital project gaps. But we've had some action since then, and you've been involved in that action through mayor and council agenda items. And so here are some of the things you might remember that have happened since May. So you approved residual transportation bonds for the Cromwell Marine Creek project. And then you approved a combination of tax notes and CCPD funding for the Northwest Patrol Facility. You can see those figures. And then a general fund surplus approval for the intermodal project, which we also supplemented with a bit of ARPA money in the next section. There were also ARPA approvals for North Beach Street and Western Center Boulevard, as well as the Meadowbrook Golf Course Maintenance Building. And then finally, you may remember that we did a swap with ARPA and general fund balance for Evans and Rosedale and the A&M Innovation Hub. And remember that that wasn't any change in our commitment to those projects. It was just about ARPA timing and that project delivery. So looking forward to next week, here are some things that are on your agenda for September 17th. So there's a time-sensitive 2018 bond program project at North Crowley Road in North Crowley and Cleburne Road, and that should say District 6. So that's an edit. Sorry. I noticed that my staff noticed it like 12 minutes ago. So I don't know how I missed it, but so anyway, North Crowley Road and Cleburne Road, there is, sorry, I'll keep you guys on your toes, see if you're looking at the slides. So that we need a $1 million gap close on that project, and that one is ready to go. And the bids actually expired in the spring, and that contractor's been holding those bids out all the way through August. And so that's the last bit of funding needed to complete that project, that project's budget. And then you're familiar with the Texas A&M Innovation Hub, the $2.4 million, which was swapped from ARPA. That is on your agenda for next week, and of course you had an IR on that today, so you're familiar. And then you'll have one M&C that is coming from TPW that requests to approve ARPA funds for 5 different transportation projects. So you see that list there. It's Long Avenue, North Beach and Champion View, Basswood and Old Santa Fe, Wichita and Martin Street, and then Western Center and Sandshell. And so you'll see those all as one M&C next week. And those are all tied to bond programs, as you can see with those sort of red flags, including a couple from the 2014 bond. So we're really trying to push, make use of that ARPA money and get those projects rolling. And then just a quick note on the library, because I know this comes up. So remember, obviously you remember this, last month, we did the downtown library purchase. And so of that $16 million from the central library proceeds, we used a little under 6.5 of that for that purchase. And then we're assuming that in the first quarter of fiscal year 25, we may see Council District 7's, the Far Northwest Library, using a bit more of those proceeds in the amount of $3.4 million. And then with an unknown date at this time, but we're sort of earmarking the fact that the rest of those proceeds will go toward renovations at the downtown library. And so that, those actions together would then use up the $16 million from selling. So I just wanted to put that note out there to show that those central library proceeds would be tied to those library actions. So from May to now, you can see the bit of reduction in a lot of those pending actions. So we've moved from $168.5 million in general capital project gaps down to $144.4 million. That includes if we did use all that library money here. And you can see we still have some fire station actions to take and obviously some other gaps to close. So as it sits today, if we use all that other library money, we'd have $33 million in that assigned general fund surplus that's being held for capital projects, no more tax notes, and a little bit of ARPA money left after those pending actions on next week. And so, as you know, this is $36 million, but we still have a number of gaps to close above and beyond that amount. And so here are what some of those projects look like. So that is the snapshot of where we are. The lab and finance and all the departments have been working really hard over the summer in conjunction with or adjacent to the budget process to scrub the lists of all these capital projects that are happening and make sure that they're input correctly, that the districts are right, that old projects that maybe for some reason are not closed are getting closed. So that's a long analysis that's happening. There are a couple of actions, as you've seen, that have had to happen in the midst of that, but we're still working to get you a list of projects by district. The other thing that happened over the summer is that finance took the lead on working with all the departments to determine ARPA eligibility for every one of those 2,400 projects. So we know of all of those projects that have a funding gap, whether they're ARPA eligible or not, and that's what's informing the M&Cs that you're seeing. So the next steps are, we just wanted to give you this progress report. We'll continue to work toward the goal of getting you that list by district. And then you'll see those M&Cs on the 17th. We'll keep evaluating and we'll continue to look at if there are bond residuals, impact fees, other sources. You know, for certain, we'll continue to look at what we can do in the meantime as we're monitoring gaps. And then again, I mentioned we're really trying to keep these trends in mind as we develop the 2026 bond. Q&A, discussion.
Will you go back to the library page? I think it was accidentally listed as District 7, but I think it's District 10.
I swear these district numbers, y'all have to forgive me. I don't know what I'm doing, clearly.
I would love to take credit for another library.
I know. Okay, yeah, sorry. I'll go through it again. We try to catch them all. That is also, as a side note, what's happening in the financial system. So when I'm trying to produce a list by district, they're sometimes wrong, or they're sometimes listed as citywide and they're not citywide. So anyway, that's part of the cleanup that's happening. And the lab will take a more strategic approach in how we're reporting and delivering things. Any other questions aside from my sad typo? Okay.
Question, Christiane.
Oh, hi.
Go ahead, Jeanette. Thank you.
Can you go back to the list of unfunded projects that have gaps?
Here?
Yes. I don't see any projects in District 11. Is there a reason why?
I don't think your projects have any gaps. Oops.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can see here on your, I know, how did that happen?
She's looking at slide 3, just for your reference there, active capital project summary, Jeanette.
Yes, so I'm on 3 and then 4. Yeah, so you have 137 active projects, $147 million in projects, but 0 gaps. So somehow you got away scot-free on this one.
I don't know. I'm just skeptical. I feel like there's something out there that's.
You could take
That's
something
the
from her
amount I
district.
trust myself to. No, yeah, so gonna give some project money away. Yeah, they have all kinds of ideas for how to fix this. Yeah, we can go over your projects and just take another look. I know. Anything else for me?
Thank you, Christiane.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Council, that's the last of our reports today. Next up would be any future agenda items requested for city management. Councilmember Beck.
Yeah, I just want to add, I had previously asked for an IR on noise and buffer zones amongst uses, and I'd like them to, when they bring that back to us, also add the potential of updating our building code to require bars and music venues to provide additional insulation for noise in relation to proximity to our single-family homes.
Any other future agenda items, council? No? Okay, with that, meeting is adjourned. See you this evening.